Because what you will start to see is the battles that are going on. We are winning the battles, and it's going to embolden people to understand that they have the freedom. Don't be intimidated out of, doing what God's calling you to do, because the law is on our side.
Welcome everyone to the Grow Leader podcast, where we grow leaders that grow churches by helping them reach their full potential. My name is Matt, and I'm so glad that you're here today. Don't forget that all of the information you're looking for about GrowLeader can be found by a quick visit over to GrowLeader.com. There you'll find information about upcoming events like our one-day regional conferences. You can access completely free resources for your church, and you'll learn how to be a part of our monthly mentoring calls with Pastor Chris. GrowLeader.com is also the place where you can find all of the show notes for everything you'll hear in the episode today. Now, before we get started, we want to give a big shout out to the partners that help make the Grow Leader podcast happen each and every month. The first is Wesleyan Investment Foundation. For over 80 years, WIF has been helping churches and church planners with their borrowing and their investing needs. Maybe you're a pastor right now dreaming about a brand new opportunity, or you're trying to decide how to wisely invest the resources you do have. We really think WIF can help you, and you can learn more about them at wifonline.com. We also want to say thank you to Great American Family. Great American Family is America's premier TV destination for high-quality, family-safe programming. Great American Family is a part of the Great American Media portfolio of brands and is carried through all major cable providers. To find out where you can stream, where you can get their content, go over to greatamericanfamily.com. And finally, we want to say a big thank you to Compassion International. Compassion International has been working to serve the world's most vulnerable children in the name of Jesus for over 70 years. They've helped over 2.2 million children, and they reach and serve every child and family through the power of the local church. That's why we love them so much here at Grow Leader. To learn more about Compassion International, visit them at compassion.com. Today's episode is a fantastic conversation between Pastor Chris and Kelly Shackelford. Kelly serves as the president, CEO, and chief counsel at First Liberty Institute. You're going to love this conversation about our religious liberties. Let's get started.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this bonus content of the Grow Leader podcast. I'm Chris Hodges, and we are so excited to help you grow your church by growing your leadership so that you can reach your full potential. And today, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine that I've recently gotten to know at an event. I was actually at another event, another charity event that I serve on the board of, the Global Teen Challenge. And we had him recently come to speak here at the Highlands College chapel service, and I'm telling you that the word on the street here at the college, don't tell the other speakers that this was their favorite chapel service ever, and you're going to love this because we're going to talk today about religious freedom. I have with us today on the Grow Leader podcast the president and CEO of First Liberty Institute, the largest legal firm in the nation, working with religious freedom, argues in front of the Supreme Court regularly, testifies before the houses of Congress. I am so delighted today to introduce Kelly Shackelford. Kelly, welcome to the Grow Leader podcast.
No, thanks, Chris. It's a privilege to be on with you.
Tell them a little bit about your story, how you got to doing this. I mean, how you obviously went to law school, but how now you're basically a nonprofit that is helping churches and helping Christians fight for their religious freedoms, and now you're helping us know the ones that we actually have. Tell them the story that got you here.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I realized my gifts were in analytical thinking and speaking, and people said, well, that's like a God or Satan choice, isn't it, to be a lawyer or a pastor, which is what I was thinking. Gosh, with analytical thinking and speaking, I need to be a pastor or a lawyer. And, I talked to my youth pastor, and he said to me, if you're called to be a minister, that's a wonderful calling. But he said, I will say this, we do have a lot of Christian pastors. Boy, we sure could use some more Christian lawyers. And as I analyzed my DNA, I realized I would probably do better at dispensing justice rather than mercy, so I'd probably make a better lawyer. And went to law school, got out. Even when I was in law school, I had a heart for ministry, so I led the discipleship ministry for the college students at my church while I was in law school. And really a bad idea. I mean, law school, everybody's studying 24/7. I was average intelligence for law students. And, that's a bad plan. But when the grades came back, I had all the high grades.
Wow.
And it was just God's way to show me, use your law, but have a heart for ministry. And so I finished school and got, if you're in the top like 3 or 4% of your class, you can compete for what's called the clerkship at a federal court, where you sort of help the federal judge like research and write opinions, and you get this unique perspective. And at the end of that year, you can pretty much name your job with the law firms. And I had all the offers, and I just felt like I would suffocate if I went and was a regular lawyer. And so I sat in my little clerk's office and I said, what do you want to do? And I thought, well, the Lord's shown you should use your legal skills, but I want to help pastors and churches and religious freedoms and our founding principles. And I'd even like to go to seminary part-time. And I laughed because there was no job like that. And 2 weeks later, 2 big partners in big law firms, never met these guys in my life, asked me to go to lunch. And at lunch, they said, look, we started donating our time for religious freedom, and we're getting so many calls, it's hurting our ability to make a living. We're wondering, would you be willing to come on, do legal cases, help pastors, churches, religious freedoms, and our founding principles, and you could even go to seminary part-time. And, that was, I was a little immature, 23, 24 years old. I said, let me pray about it. Like that wasn't the answer to prayer. And the next day I was like, I think that was your answer to prayer. And they said, how much you need to live on. And I was making $28,000 as a clerk on a federal court. These guys pitched in out of their pocket. We started a nonprofit, and that was 34 years ago.
Wow.
And now First Liberty is the largest legal nonprofit in the country that all we do is religious freedom. It was, God knew it needed to be created, and he created it, and knew it was going to have time to grow, to handle really the attacks and the assaults we're under right now across the country.
Well, I want to get into some of the stories that you shared at the chapel service with our students, because I think what the net result, Kelly, was of your time with us was that it built confidence in all of us, that we have freedoms that we didn't even know we had. You guys have won cases that we didn't even know have been won. We have a position in culture that's not what culture is telling us. So I think a lot of pastors and Christians are kind of playing scared right now and kind of on defense. And I want you to just kind of begin with Gabriella, the first story you told our students. And let's just walk through some of these things that are happening, and with the goal of really informing the 17,000 churches and pastors that are a part of the Grow Leader Network. Let's educate them on what's going on here in America.
Yeah, Gabriella is a great example of just a simple way to describe what we do, which is, let's say you're a 5-year-old girl, Gabriella Perez, and you are caught praying over your meal, told, quote, it's not good to pray at school, and you're a poor family, you live outside of Orlando. I mean, what exactly do? You don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to go hire a legal team. So First Liberty comes in, we bring the best litigators in the country, they all donate their time, so that when we win the case for Gabriella, which we did, we don't just win for Gabriella, but we set a precedent that protects all of our kids and our grandkids. And that's a quick summary of, I guess, what we do. I'd say the big summary of the whole, what you're talking about, people were surprised by. I've been fighting in this arena for 34 years, and we've been winning, but something very different is happening right now. There is a move of God in this arena that is, well, it's never happened in the history of our country. Precedents that have been in place for 50 years, really sort of suppressing religious expression, are all being overturned. I mean, we just overturned one. I think we're about to overturn another one this term that we're just arguing here in April.
In front of the Supreme Court.
Yes, in front of the Supreme Court. We won. The best way to put it is, there were 8,000 requests to the Supreme Court last year. They took 67 cases. Okay, so your chances of getting them to take your case, not good. If my goal had been for us to have 2 cases at the Supreme Court, I'd be a fool. It doesn't happen. And but last year we didn't have 2 cases. We had 2 wins. at the Supreme Court within 6 days of each other.
I want you to talk about those. Talk about the main school choice. Talk about Coach Kennedy. Of course, that was the famous one that everybody knows about. Tell us some of these stories.
Well, it just shows you how something dramatic is happening and how everything is shifting in a really positive way for religious freedom in the midst of all this darkness. The Maine case, school choice cases, Maine has for over 100 years, most of their school districts don't have public schools. So they've always allowed the parents to take the money and to pick any public or private school they wanted. But then a few decades ago, they decided they would change that, and they would say, well, we're going to add one restriction. You can't pick a school if they teach anything religious. So for instance, you could teach everything exactly like the other school, but if you have one class on your faith, you're out. Well, we said you can't do that. That's unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court agreed with us, 6-3. And so most people know that we won this major school choice case, but that's what they see it as. And it is big for that alone, right? I mean, everywhere in the country right now, where there is a school choice program, you cannot exclude the Christian schools. That is unconstitutional. So there are a lot of places now where churches can form schools because there's now resources that, people can pick. So that's a big deal in that alone. But it's so much bigger because the basis of the decision wasn't schools. The basis was what the court said was whenever there's a government program that provides benefits in a generalized fashion, you can never exclude the participants because of their religion, the fact that they're using them in a religious way, all that. So that is much broader. That affects, drug rehab and homeless missions, and so every church, every teen challenge, every group that's out there that it wants to take on these societal ills and participate in these programs, but with a Christian perspective, they now can't be stopped and they have to be treated just like everybody else. And so very significant what that precedent's going to mean. But the even bigger one is the Coach Kennedy case, which we won 6 days later than we won the school choice case. And that, I think most people know, Coach Kennedy was fired because after the games, he made a promise to God that when everybody was milling around the field and making reservations for dinner and all this after the game, he would go first. The first thing he does is he goes to the 50-yard line, goes to a knee, and thanks God for the privilege of coaching the young men. And he was told, if you do that again, you'll be fired. Well, he lost for 7 years in litigation until we won at the Supreme Court. And most people know we won, and that coach gets to go back to coaching, which he is. And this fall, he'll at the end of the game, he'll go to the center of the field. We have an injunction that they cannot in any way stop him, punish him, do anything. I bet there'll be 1,000 TV cameras, Chris, there for that prayer when he goes to a knee.
That's so awesome.
In fact, we're going to try to do a movement, which people will hear about later, of really trying to tell everybody in the country that Friday to go to a knee with Coach.
Yeah.
Because we want to really begin to help people understand things are changing, and that you can take back your own communities. You can express your faith. There's lots of things people think they can't do that they can. So that was significant, and that's great. But it's actually a lot bigger than that. There's a case in the Coach Kennedy decision that is 50 years old. It's called Lemon. I think God knew what to name it. It's a lemon. And it is what has been used to sort of suppress religious expression in public for 50 years. We have an establishment clause, which said the founders didn't want there to be a nationally established church. And what happened is 50 years ago, the court said, no, we think that means a lot more than that. And it means separation of church and state, which means wherever government is, religion can't be, which is a way to push religion to the corners of society. We think that if you're offended by religion, you can bring a lawsuit, which you can never bring lawsuits just because you're offended. And it just opened up all this stuff that we've seen our whole lives, right? Nativity scenes coming down, menorahs coming down, 10 Commandments under attack, any sort of religion at school by students or whoever else, everybody is in a panic. Why? Because any of that's in the Constitution? No, because of Lemon. And it's been cited 7,000 times. Well,
Oh.
in Coach Kennedy case, we overruled it. It was reversed. It's over. So all the crosses that went down, they go back up, right? All the 10 commandments that got pushed into the closet, they come back out. All the things that people have been taught for 50 years just got flipped. And so the problem is that most people aren't aware of this. And most people don't know the power and the freedom that they have. And I've got lots of little analogies in my mind, but one of them is, it's like there's an enemy castle and God just blew a hole through the wall, and we're all standing at the hole going, wow, look at the hole. We need to go through the hole. It's like we're always complaining because we're always reacting to what the enemy is doing, right? And everybody's always saying, why don't you go on? This is offense.
Wow.
Okay, we've already won. It's just a matter of people taking the ground the Lord has already won for them, right? You can have a prayer at the school board meeting. You kids and everybody can pray after the football game, right? You can have a nativity scene at Christmas. There's all these things that people go, no, wait, we can't do that. Yes, you can. We just flipped all of this. And again, this is just the beginning. I really believe this, as somebody who's been doing this for 34 years. We're winning these cases, but this is just the beginning. So God is doing this dramatic thing right now. He is massively increasing protections for religious freedom at a time when things are really dark. And I don't know why God's doing this. I hope it's for a revival. It could be just because we need the protection because it's getting so hostile. But the point is, people need to know that, what a disgrace it would be if God opened up all this freedom for us and then we just sit back and do nothing with it. And so that's sort of the good news is God's done the work. We just need to follow him through the hole he just blew open. And we need to restore faith in every community. Everywhere that crosses went down, in every little community, they need to go back up. The 10 Commandments need to come back out. People need to start being out with their faith. And I think it'll catch on like a good virus, like a snowball. I think when people see other people and they realize, I think it's going to embolden or give confidence. We're going to see faith break out all across the country in ways that will move us back to who we were as a country and why we founded this country.
Well, first of all, thank you for being that person on the front lines for all of us and defending our freedoms and winning these cases. But I want to ask you, what probably one area do people still think that they can't do it that they actually can?
Gosh, there's a lot. I think it's particular when the government, because of what I just talked about, when the government is around, they feel like somehow that means no religious freedom is allowed. When there's a free exercise of religion clause in the First Amendment, there's a free speech clause. And Coach Kennedy's a great example, right? This is not only the school district that did this. Their lawyers thought it was okay to fire Coach Kennedy for going to a knee and saying a prayer. He didn't tell any students to go with him. He didn't do anything. What they said is some student across the lawn might see him. And if they see him, they might feel encouraged to pray. And that would be a violation of the Constitution. It's like, well, I guess it would have been no problem if he'd have put on a dress or, done anything else. That's not a problem. But if he prays, we can't allow that. He had every right as a citizen to pray. And again, the lawyers thought this was okay. The school districts thought it was okay. The judges out in the Ninth Circuit thought it was okay. So you can see how people have been really trained for 50 years to keep their faith to themselves. And I think, Chris, this is the way the enemy always works.
Right.
Fear and lies. And that's what this is. If he can get us to censor ourselves, then he's won.
Wow.
And it's just a matter of us now. God just said, hey, this is all overturned. 7,000 citations, all overturned. Now it's just a matter of every church in their own community saying, why don't we have prayer at the school board meeting? Why don't we have prayer at the city council? It's all legal. If you're not doing it, it's because you don't want to have prayer.
Wow.
And there's 100 of these type of things you can do now in your community, just living out your faith, even in public.
So let me ask you a question about students' rights, because a lot of the questions that you got at our chapel were from our students who are working as youth pastors. What can these students do? Where is the line of, no, you can't do that? I don't know if it's some level of coercion or, you talked about if a student watched Coach Kennedy, could a student who wanted to pray, could they have gone there and got on a knee with him? I think especially at the school level, that's where people are wanting some clarity on, okay, you can do this, and this is even what your students can do.
Yeah, well, number one, students can basically, they are American citizens. They have a right to free speech under the First Amendment. They have a right to the free exercise of their religion. And the only limitation that you're referencing is if the government is doing something. So the Establishment Clause is about the government establishing a religion for everybody else, or taking away somebody else's free exercise. So only if those students are working for the government. So let's say they're at a public school. They're now a teacher and they're in that school. Well, then even though they're a student teacher or whatever they are, if they have authority over young children, then they can't coerce or push or violate somebody else's free exercise. But outside of that, they can do whatever. Students have the right to free speech, free exercise. Now, that doesn't mean in the middle of math class they can stand up in their class as a student and say
Right.
the Lord's Prayer, right? That's disruptive. It's not because it's religious. It's because they're disrupting the classroom. But outside of that, I mean, there's an old case, Chris, that goes back to the 1960s where some students, and really it was out of their faith, they were sort of pacifists in their religion, and they wore an armband to protest the Vietnam War. And the school told them they couldn't do that because people didn't like it. And the Supreme Court said neither teachers nor students leave their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. So those students have every right to share their faith, to speak their beliefs.
So good.
And the teachers have the same. They have the right. They can't use their position to coerce or force or in any way take away somebody else's right, but they have every right to be who they are and to be open about what they believe.
One of the things that gets thrown in people's faces all of the time is separation of church and state. Would you please explain that to all of our listeners who might not know what that really is all about?
Well, number one, it's not in the Constitution.
Exactly.
A lot of people think separation of church and state, the words is in the Constitution. It's not. We have two religion clauses. One is the non-establishment clause. We don't want the establishment of a religion. And then the other is the free exercise clause. Thomas Jefferson, where that phrase came from is Thomas Jefferson, 10 years after the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was passed, wrote a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association, which was concerned that the government might restrict their free exercise. And he said, no, there's this wall of separation to protect church and state. And what he's talking about there is the institutions of the church and the state, right? That we don't want there to be, a Church of America, and we don't want the government to take over the church and the church to take over the government. But almost always where that term's used, it's misused. It's used to try to almost say separation of religion and state, which means you can never bring your faith to the public arena, to the debate, to the Congress, to wherever else. And that's just totally wrong. That's not what the term means. And so it's not in the Constitution. And number two, it's almost always misused when it's used and pulled out. Usually what it is it's sort of these fundamentalist separation of church and state people. They want to say, well, hey, look, we want total separation from religion and government, and therefore anywhere the government is, you can't have religion anywhere near. And so it's just a way to destroy religious freedom. And it's not the law, never has been the law, but there's a lot of people misunderstand because of things that people say in public that somehow they're not allowed to talk about their faith in public or at some public arena or whatever else. When the founders, they had a paid chaplain to open up their congressional sessions. We still do.
Yep.
So it's very different from what people think, unfortunately.
So one of the functions of First Liberty Institute is not only to argue these cases, but you also are a resource for churches. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the podcast today is because that's what we do at GrowLeader is we resource churches. We give away millions. I think we have over 2 million downloads of our resources to churches and pastors and things that we just give away for free. You have a lot of things that are available at First Liberty Institute. Talk about some of that. So before we close the podcast today.
Yeah, probably the best thing would be, the best thing absolutely is know there's always a place you can call. I mean, we have all of our lawyers, we're free of charge. You're never going to be able to call lawyers free of charge, and all we do is our people, their expertise is religious freedom. So just if you have an issue, don't ever allow yourself to be intimidated or feared out of doing what God's calling you to do. Just call us. There's almost always a way to do what He's calling you to do. But we have resources that you can look at. We have religious liberty protection kits. Like we have one for churches in particular. And you might think, well, why would I need that? Well, you need that because most churches, their legal documents are not in good order. So what happens if their city one year passes an ordinance on LGBT protection and they've never even thought of having a facilities use policy for who can use their chapel? And now all of a sudden you're denying a same-sex couple. Well, if you just put some policies in that tie into your faith and where you stand, you're so much more protected. So religious liberty protection kits for churches, and it lays out, here are the documents to look at. Here are the types of things that you can lay in about what your beliefs are that will provide you religious freedom protection if anybody ever tries to interfere. Same for nonprofit ministries, whatever that ministry, including Christian schools. We've got a pamphlet for that. We've got a pamphlet even for faith-based for-profit businesses and what the law is on that. And then we have, religious liberty protection kits for teachers, for students, for you if you're in the military. So those are all resources that are available. And we have pamphlets, but it's easier to just go online and you can tap right into that pamphlet and look through it and call us if you have any question. And easiest way to find all of our stuff is you just spell it out, firstliberty.org, firstliberty.org. And I would encourage people, go down like half the page or whatever and make sure you sign up for that Be an Insider so you get the email every Friday.
Good.
Because what you will start to see is the battles that are going on. We are winning the battles, and it's going to embolden people to understand that they have the freedom. Don't be intimidated out of, doing what God's calling you to do, because the law is on our side. It's just most people aren't being told because the secular media doesn't want to talk about these cases because they're not important to them, but they're really important for anybody who's in the church.
Well, again, thank you so much. Again, guys, go to firstliberty.org for the website, for the resources, for the phone number. And if you face any kind of difficulty in the public arena, be sure to just pick up the phone and call them. They're there to give you advice and to help you out with that. If you'd like to see the full presentation of this material and all of these cases, so if you want a more of an expanded version of what we covered today, you can go to the YouTube channel of Highlands College, and you'll see where Kelly Shackelford spoke this month in the early part of April of 2023, and it was spectacular. I encourage you again to go watch this. You can even see some of the faces and the slides of the people that he is defending. It was a spectacular presentation. My friend, thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate all that you do. All the pastors and leaders not only use these resources, but can I encourage you to consider, at least just pray about supporting First Liberty Institute. We have done that as a church. We give toward them and to so they can continue the mission that really serves every single one of us. So just put that before the Lord to consider donating to First Liberty Institute. And Kelly, thank you so much for all that you do, sir.
God bless you, Chris. Thank you for all you do.
And thanks today for joining me at the bonus episode of the GrowLeader podcast. We'll see you next time.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us today. To learn more about Kelly Shackelford and what First Liberty does, go over to firstliberty.org. We also want to say a big thank you to Great American Family, Compassion International, and Wesleyan Investment Foundation for helping make the podcast happen. Hey, don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, you can get your show notes for today's episode over at GrowLeader.com. We'll see you next time on the Grow Leader Podcast.